Welcome to Trans Truth, the podcast dedicated to dispelling myths, fear, and ignorance about transgender people. From time to time, we'll also be sharing items of interest to the transgender community, from political and news events to health, fashion, and beauty. Also, please be sure to follow and share the Trans Truth podcast on Facebook. And now, here is some news and commentary that should be of interest to our listeners. Okay, before we jump into the news, I've got two announcemements to make. One, the Trans Truth podcast will be doing a remote recording session at the Houston Trans Pride celebration this Friday at 7 p.m. at the Social Beer Garden. That's right, this Friday at 7 p.m. at the Social Beer Garden. The Monica Roberts Foundation, the Monica Roberts Resource Center has put together the Houston Pride celebration, and we will be there, so stop by and have words with us. And my other announcement is that my co-host, Jeri Ann, is going to be picking up some slack on the news portion of our program. So welcome to the news, Jeri Ann.
Thank you.
Okay. WNCN of Fayetteville, North Carolina, reports that transgender student Gray Bird, the class valedictorian at E.E. Smith High School in Cumberland County, was not allowed to deliver his commencement speech as he'd written it. According to Bird, he was informed by the school board via email, informing him that he would not be allowed to talk about anything related to the transgender community. The board cited a policy that prohibits political or social statements in graduation speeches. Bird said that he had wanted to mention that, quote, transgender people are facing new levels of violence each day, and that the voices of transgender children are being overlooked, unquote. This is disgraceful. Once again, right-wing politicians are trying to cast simple facts, verifiable professional consensus as politics in order to suppress the truth about transgender people. We, the transgender community, have been the right's latest boogeyman for a few years now. As we move into the 6th month of the Trump administration's campaign to destroy our society and wreck our government, it's becoming clear that we are not the only distraction that they will be using while they literally steal food and medicine away from the most needy Americans and mortgage our nation's future by giving trillions in tax cuts to those who need it least. We're going to get to that and what we are doing about it and what we'd like you to do about it in just a bit.
A federal judge in California has blocked the Trump administration from enforcing anti-diversity and anti-transgender executive orders and grant funding requirements that LGBTQ plus organizations say are unconstitutional. U.S. District Judge John Tigar said that the federal government cannot force recipients to halt programs that promote diversity, equality, equity, inclusion, or acknowledge the existence of transgender people in order to receive grant funding. The order will remain in effect while the legal case continues, although government lawyers will likely appeal. He went on to say that the executive branch must still be bound by the Constitution in shaping its agenda, and that even in the context of federal subsidies, and I quote, it cannot weaponize congressionally appropriated funds to single out protected communities for disfavored treatment or suppress ideas that it does not like or has deemed dangerous. The plaintiffs include health centers, LGBTQ plus service groups, and the Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, Transgender Historical Society. All receive federal funding and say they cannot complete their missions by following the president's executive orders. The San Francisco AIDS Foundation, one of the plaintiffs, said in 2023 it received a 5-year grant from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to expand and enhance sexual health services, including the prevention of sexually transmitted infections. The $1.3 million project specifically targets communities disproportionately affected by sexual health disparities.
It almost seems like they want those communities to get sick and die.
Yes. Yep, it seems like that. And we're going to see more of that as we progress through this episode and some future episodes too.
Oh, good.
I hate to say. So anyway, continuing. In April, the CDC informed the nonprofit that is, and we're still speaking about that same nonprofit, the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, that it must immediately terminate all programs, personnel, activities, or contracts that promote DEI or gender ideology. President Donald Trump has signed a flurry of executive orders since taking office in January, including ones to roll back transgender protections and stop DEI programs. Lawyers for the government say that the president is permitted to align government funding and enforce strategies with his policies. Plaintiffs say that Congress, and not the president, has the power to condition how federal funds are used, and that the executive orders restrict free speech rights.
On Wednesday, June 18th, 2025, the Supreme Court of the United States upheld a Tennessee law prohibiting, quote, certain medical treatments, unquote, for transgender minors in that state. There just isn't much more to say about this than we here at Trans Truth have been pointing out for years, ever since the Republican Party decided to start targeting the trans community for the fear-mongering that has been a part of their playbook for well over half a century. They can no longer use the communist or the Negro or the homosexual as an other for their followers to be afraid of. Not openly, at least. They can no longer boast about protecting the white women or protecting the sanctity of marriage. They really can't even take on adults with gender dysphoria, but children.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Now, there's a tried and true winner of a political play. Think of the children, they cry. And then they proceed to tell all manner of lies about the professionally recognized
standard of care
for providing age-appropriate, gender-affirming care to pediatric patients. Just leave them alone until they're 18, goes the oh-so-reasonable-sounding refrain. Never mind the fact that virtually all of the experts agree that failing to provide such care is tantamount to child abuse, and that such a failure raises a trans kid's risk of suicide by 400%. Again, it's almost as if they want us to commit suicide and die.
Republicans in the Missouri legislature want everyone to know that they also are very concerned about protecting children. Not so much the 130 children and teenagers who die from gunfire in an average year. Those deaths, about 2/3 of which are homicides, are unfortunate collateral damage in the race to make firearms ever more accessible in Missouri, and not the untold number of children who go hungry and without medical care because the state can't figure out how to fix its broken down application processes for SNAP and Medicaid. Those kids are on their own. The children of keen interest to Missouri Republicans are the very small number who may, as teenagers, seek medical treatment to deal with strong feelings that they are meant to be another gender than the one that they were assigned at birth. These are children who, with the consent of their parents, may try to slow down changes in their bodies with puberty-blocking medications or use hormones consistent with the gender they identify with. A very small number may opt for gender-affirming surgery eventually. We're not talking about a lot of kids here. Less than 1% of the state's population is estimated to be transgender, and that percentage holds true for teenagers. So less than 1% of teenagers is what we're actually talking about. Missouri Republicans, however, are fixated on them. They spend hours in committee meetings and floor debates professing concern for their health, while at the same time obsessing over what bathrooms they can use at school and the prospect that someone assigned male at birth might show up on a girls' softball roster. Now, lest someone still think that the Missouri Republicans still care about trans kids, recently they used trans kids as bait when trying to pass a resolution asking voters to approve a constitutional amendment that would outlaw abortion except in a few circumstances. An abortion ban is currently not the will of the people in Missouri, but it would also, as its proposed ballot language states, protect children from gender transition by banning the use of puberty blockers, hormones, and surgeries. What's crazy is that Missouri already has a law that outlaws gender-affirming health care for minors through 2027, when the statute would have to be renewed. The unnecessary ballot provision is a cynical ploy to lure social issues voters who might otherwise support abortion rights. But to state the obvious, this isn't about the kids. This is about power and deception. A majority of Missouri voters support abortion rights. They made that clear in November when they approved Constitutional Amendment 3, which enshrined the right to abortion in the state. Legislative Republicans can't let that stand, but they also know they're crosswise with the will of the people. And so they are throwing transgender children into the line of fire. Responsible adults don't drag vulnerable teenagers into an incendiary debate, expose them to intense public scrutiny, and deprive them of health care that a consensus of medical groups agree can lower risk of suicide.
Think of the children indeed. On the very same day that the Supreme Court upheld that Tennessee law banning gender-affirming care for minors, NPR broke the news that the Trump administration is shutting down the 988 suicide hotline for LGBTQ youth.
The Trump administration is ending an option for LGBTQ youth at the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Starting next month, LGBTQ youth calling 988 will no longer be connected to specialized service organizations. NPR's Selena Simmons-Duffin reports on what the hotline was doing under the law.
When you call 988, you're given 3 options. Press 1 for veterans, press 2 for Spanish, and press 3 for LGBTQ youth. Mark Henson of the Trevor Project, the contractor that fields about half the LGBTQ calls, explains that these options go back to the law that created the Lifeline in 2020.
Which every senator voted for, significant bipartisan support in the Congress, and President Trump himself signed.
That law, he explains,
set aside the need for specialized services for groups that have a higher risk of suicidality.
The law even mentions LGBTQ young people and notes they're 4 times more likely to contemplate suicide than their peers. Since the LGBTQ option rolled out in 2022, more than 1 million people have pressed 3 when they called 988.
Demand has continued to increase. This has saved lives.
Then, this week, the Trevor Project received a stop work order from the federal government.
We had no inkling there would be a 30-day stop work notice.
In a press release, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration explained that in mid-July, 988 will, quote, no longer silo LGB plus youth services. Missing from that acronym is the T for transgender and the Q for queer. Ben Miller is a psychologist and adjunct faculty at Stanford's medical school.
To me, it's more of a message, and that message is more like you're on your own.
He says there were clues that something like this might happen. It wasn't in the president's budget for next year, for instance.
As someone who has worked in this space for over 2 decades, I just don't understand the strategy. There's no clear transition plan.
The Trevor Project's Mark Henson says they're still making their case to lawmakers.
Trying to show folks that there's still time to reverse this decision and time for Congress to save this program.
The Department of Health and Human Services did not respond to NPR's questions for this story. Selena Simmons-Duffin, NPR News.
I was going to say again, it's almost like they would rather have those kids killing themselves, but it's not almost like. It's not political. It's just hate. They want those kids to die.
For several years, we here at Trans Truth have been hard at work bringing to our listeners across the globe topics of interest and interviews and news stories pertinent to the trans community and our allies. Our vision is to normalize trans people as human beings with value, not only in the U.S., but across the globe. Our mission is to equip our listeners with informed responses to the myths, lies, and disinformation that's being used to dehumanize transgender people, primarily for political gain. We believe that trans rights are human rights. Unfortunately, events have occurred in recent months that ignore, negate, and deny basic human rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Without the basic rights that Americans have been guaranteed for 249 years, there can be no trans rights. So, Trans Truth is broadening its focus. We will be looking at the broader picture of increasing human rights violations, the undermining of democracy, and acquisition of power by the richest white men on the planet. Here are some areas of concern that our listeners need to be aware of.
Well, let's start off with immigration and asylum. The United States is, of course, a nation of immigrants. We have a long tradition of welcoming all. Well, because we needed help stealing land from the locals. But I digress. We do get it wrong from time to time. Public sentiment was largely isolationist just prior to World War II, for example. The United States turned away the SS Broadening, carrying hundreds of Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi oppression. And of course, during World War II, there was the internment of basically all the Japanese people, even citizens in this country. And we're getting it wrong again. We've allowed ourselves to be convinced to fear the other. See if these words sound familiar. Rapists, murderers, and drug dealers. Executive Order 10888 suspends the right of immigrants to even seek asylum in this country. Now, that might even be violating international obligations, treaty agreements, where we said we would take care of those people.
Kelly, let me just comment on this. My grandfather was an immigrant. He was a squarehead. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term, but that was a derogatory term for people from Holland. My grandfather was an immigrant. He actually stowed away on a ship. I'm not sure what the reason was. Could be because he was just 16 years old and ran away from home to join the U.S. Navy. Not sure about that. But yeah, I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for immigrants because I'm a descendant of one.
Well, so am I. My maternal grandparents came over on the boat from Germany in, gosh, I think the 20s. Anyway, we've also seen outright violations of the rule of law. Asylum seekers are being rounded up and sent to offshore concentration camps. Yes, concentration camps. There's just no other word for it. Abductions are even being made at the hearings that these asylum seekers have voluntarily shown up for. That is staggering betrayal of those people's trust. By the way, polls are quickly showing falling support for Trump's immigration policy. Immigration was one of the big winners in Trump's election. But not to put too fine a point on it, even Trump supporters are saying now, this is not what we voted for.
Well, yeah, they expected him to round up the drug dealers and the murderers and the rapists, but instead they're rounding up yard crews and day workers at a Home Depot and hotel workers and things like that. Just regular, hardworking, everyday people who were paying income tax, by the way.
Well, that is exactly what they're doing. And we're going to get into why they're doing that in just a bit. Some of the other anti-immigration moves they've made are to re-implement the, quote, remain in Mexico policy, forcing asylum seekers to, remain in Mexico while they wait for the now non-existent court hearings. And, Jeri Ann, we know a few asylum seekers that came through Mexico, don't we?
Yes. They weren't maybe from Mexico, but they came through Mexico.
Right.
But in particular, I know trans women from El Salvador, of course, Mexico, and Honduras. Oh, and in Chile, Devi is from Chile. Got a message from her a couple days ago. So, we know some.
Yeah, and they were fleeing for their lives.
Exactly.
Let's see what else has been going on. Cancellation of the Customs and Border Patrol's One app. That was literally a smartphone app that would-be immigrants could use to get into the system to seek asylum. And now there are just mass campaigns to round up brown people.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done.
And rendition them to concentration camps. Yes, concentration camps. Concentration camps has a fairly specific definition, even if just by convention. They are for political prisoners and for disfavored minority groups like racial minorities and identity minorities, trans people, homosexuals. And the other big feature of a concentration camp is a total denial of due process. They just round you up, load you on the train or bus, and ship you off to a place where you may never be heard from again. Due process is important. It's part of the guarantees in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights and the Constitution kind of, but not quite interchangeably refer to both the people or persons and citizens. In the Bill of Rights, specifically when we're talking about due process, it is the people who are guaranteed that. So, no, you don't have to be a citizen to be entitled to those protections. So why are they doing this? Why are they thumbing their nose at the Constitution? My theory is it's racist PR.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done.
No matter how Trump shits on the concept of basic human rights, 34% thereabouts of Americans still approve. And that's that same racist bunch that was okay with the Muslim ban and any other racial or ethnic minority. They don't care. And it's thinly veiled, but it's there. Whenever they do something like this, like suddenly rounding up all the restaurant workers and farm workers and day laborers at Home Depot, it's with a wink to the racist 34%.
Yeah, we can't leave this topic without mentioning the commercials that we see on TV with, is it Christy Nome? Is that her name?
Oh, Ice Barbie?
Yeah, Ice Barbie. Yeah, she's telling the immigrants, leave right now and maybe you can come back. I mean, my gosh, that reminds me of Hansel and Gretel. Shoot. Thanks for covering the immigration issue to this extent. My feeling is we're going to have to revisit this. My fear is that Trump and his minions are practicing on the immigrants.
Oh my God!
I don't think they're going to stop with the immigrants.
Who's next?
Well, I don't know, but he's made threats about his political opponents and locking them up, and of course, there's executive orders about trans people. So who knows? But we're going to keep an eye on this, folks. And like I said, if there are no human rights, there are no trans rights. Maybe it'll start with the brown people. Of course, they catch up some citizens in the melee too. Oh, I know what it was. J.D. Vance recently referred to Alex Padilla as Jose.
Jose Padilla. Yep, I remember hearing that.
Put this in perspective. J.D. Vance was in the Senate serving with Alex for years. They know each other. This is just an outright racial slur.
Yep, that's another wink to the racist.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done.
Right, by the Vice President of the United States. So anyway, all these things
statesmanlike,
all these things are matters of concern, and that's why we are dealing with them now. Okay, another category that we're concerned with is our criminal justice system. There's been a rise in police killings, despite calls for police reform and the right-wingers accusing the left-wingers of defunding the police and all kinds of nonsense. The police killings continue to rise, disproportionately affecting Black and other minorities. There's been continued abuse in the detention centers, concentration camps, and other holding facilities. Migrants are repeatedly held in abusive conditions, denied access to legal counsel. That brings to mind one of our acquaintances from Honduras several years ago was denied access to legal counsel. And we remember when we had Danielle telling her story on here several years ago. Right. Danielle was her attorney finally and got her asylum.
What was her name?
Well, I'm trying to think. It'll come to me here in just a minute.
Well, she ended up doing okay. She's a movie star.
Yeah, she was in a movie. She got high school education, got a job, got a car. Yeah. So, and there have been reports of torture. Our lawmakers can't even.
We've seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen those abuses.
Well, our lawmakers can't even make a routine tour of detention centers, which is part of their oversight responsibility.
Right.
Without advance notice, several days advance notice, so they can clean the place up and maybe give the inmates some food and clothes, or who knows? Who knows why they need several days' notice? Anyway, we're talking about poor prison conditions, overcrowding, inadequate health care, violence, lack of supervision. There's always going to be violence because they're locked up with some violent people.
No wonder they're making it hard to check on the welfare of those that have been detained. They learned their lesson. All those cameras in there taking pictures of kids in cages during the last Trump administration, they aren't letting that happen again.
No. Okay, that pretty much covers the criminal justice system so far. There's a lot more to deal with on this topic, and we will come back to this on future episodes, but we need to move on.
Okay.
What else are we concerned with?
Well, this is Trans Truth, of course, so let's talk about their specific attacks on trans rights. Let's call it the latest rounds. This year, across 26 states, there have been 115 anti-trans bills passed in 2025, just this year. Among the effects of those, among the new laws that those bills created, are restrictions on health care access, bathroom bills, yet again, and preventing trans kids from competing in athletic competition. Many of those bills focus specifically on trans kids, almost always pretending to be protecting those kids.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Reproductive rights are under attack. Extreme abortion bans leading to dangerous restrictions on life-saving medical procedures. This boggles my mind. Just the other day, Florida Republican State Representative Kat Cammack shared that she almost died last year when doctors were reluctant to treat her ectopic pregnancy for fear of criminal prosecution. This was in Florida last year, less than a month after their extremely restrictive abortion ban had taken effect. Now, if you don't know what an ectopic pregnancy is, it's a dangerous, potentially very lethal condition where a fertilized egg implants outside of the uterus, in this case, in her fallopian tubes. Incredibly, she blames the Democrats for fear-mongering, making the doctors afraid to do what was necessary to save her life. The doctors were doing what they were required to do by law on advice of legal counsel. Long story short, they were able to save her life, but she still persists in blaming the left for her near-death experience. Oh, and we're rolling back child labor laws. Florida Republicans, again, among others, are trying to make it, once again, legal to exploit children in sub-minimum wage jobs without restrictions on hours.
Well, as I recall,
they're disposable, I guess.
It has been
You can put them
illegal to hire anyone under the age of 16.
I think that varies from state to state, but yeah, I know that you can't work them full time until they're 16. If they're still in school, something like that. That's
work them
that's
as long
right
as you
out
want
the
to.
door.
Give them whatever you want to. Maybe just a bowl of rice, and we're good.
Yep. Well, we got to replace all those immigrant laborers somehow.
Yeah.
Not surprisingly, the fossil fuel industry, having paid hundreds of billions in Republican campaign funds, are also reaping the benefits of that investment. They've expanded drilling. They're enjoying relaxed regulations. And what was that drilling rig in the Gulf a few years ago that blew up? Made the Gulf.
Yeah, Horizon.
The Gulf.
Something Horizon.
Deep water horizon. Yeah. Set the ocean on fire for weeks, if I remember right. Yeah, Mark Wahlberg and his crew. really screwed up there. Anyway, you can look for more of that, I bet, too. And basically, we've already talked about this, but every day the Trump administration and the Republicans in general are in defiance of the rule of law. We've given you those examples of how they're treating the immigrants, basically thumbing their nose at the Constitution. But the administration is also ignoring court orders over and over, just as a matter of routine. They've started to extort law firms that they have a bone for. A law firm that may take cases contrary to the administration's goals. They get blackmailed and extorted. And of course, they attack the press. Trump is ceaseless in his comments. I mean, just this morning on the White House lawn, we heard this.
CNN is scum, and so is MSDNC. They're all, and frankly, the networks aren't much better. It's all fake news.
Yeah, we hear that from our president on a regular basis. They banned the Associated Press from the White House briefing room. That I think is now a thing of the past. They did whatever they needed to do to get back in the White House's good graces. Immigration Service is turning away foreign journalists. They are stopping them, questioning them for up to 9 hours, and then sending them back to where they came from. They're threatening to arrest journalists. I got news for the Trump administration. Here in Texas, we're real big on our First Amendment rights. So if you don't like that, come and take it.
I've heard that before.
Yep, I will just refer you to Google if you're not from Texas and you don't know what we're talking about. Okay, and then they just make shit up. Recently, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, was questioned about removing transgender military officers and enlisted personnel who were well qualified and in many cases highly decorated. And he said that those people were mentally ill and not qualified for military service. He went on to say that gender dysphoria used to not be a mental illness, but as a result of a Trump executive order, now it is.
Secretary Hegseth, as you probably know, today is National Women's Veterans Day. And in your confirmation hearing and in subsequent conversations, you've said, and I'm quoting you now, women in our military have and continue to make amazing contributions across all aspects of our battlefield, and that women were some of the best soldiers you served with. Do you still stand by those statements?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. As you probably know, I represent San Diego, the biggest military community in the country, so I meet with countless service members all the time. And with your focus on emphasis and on merit and standards, I wanted to tell you about 3 incredible women in our military. So the first woman is a major responsible for advanced collective warfighting training. Her officer evaluation report rates her as most qualified. And some of the comments included are, and I'm quoting now, she lives the Army values and demonstrates the warrior ethos daily. She rates within the top 5% of officers I've encountered in 18 years of military service. The second woman is an aviator with a record of over 50 combat missions, including deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. 2 quotes from her most recent fitness report in April include, quoting again, "People excel under her leadership, and she has my strongest possible recommendation for promotion." The third woman is an instructor for an Army ROTC battalion. According to her evaluation report, her overall performance was rated at far exceeds standards, and the comments include, "She is undoubtedly within the top 5% of non-commissioned officers I've worked with in my 22 years of service." Given their stellar qualifications and accomplishments and their record of surpassing standards, I assume that you agree that the Pentagon and the services should do everything they can to retain women like these, correct?
I would commend the major, the aviator, and the instructor for their service.
Great. I'm glad you agree, because I also believe we should be recruiting and retaining the very best and brightest in our country to serve in the military. And yet, you are actually kicking out these 3 highly qualified service members solely because of their identity. These are trans women. And you are using the very same arguments that have been used against desegregating the military or allowing women to serve or allowing gay people to serve. And in all those cases, those arguments were wrong. So I think it's clear that this is actually not about standards or, and I'm quoting you again, an equal, unwavering, gender-neutral, merit-based system, because if it were, you would be keeping these women in. Instead, you are the one injecting culture wars into the military, and it's at the detriment of our military readiness and national security. Now, General Kane, I'd like to turn to you.
So to be clear, these are men who think they're women.
These are women. I'm happy to educate you on
But these are men,
on trans
and so
issues at another
what we've
time.
identified is that there's mental health issues with that belief system.
I'd like to turn to General
are
Kane
detrimental
now.
to readiness, and that's the determination that we've made and that we stand behind. Gender dysphoria.
And so you don't
complications.
trust your commanding officers to be able to evaluate the people under them to decide if that were true, wouldn't that show up in their fit reps? And yet these fit reps are from the last 3 months, and all of their commanding officers say that they exceed standards.
Of course, that was California Congresswoman Sanders questioning the Secretary of Defense in a House Armed Services Committee hearing on the Trump administration's plan to discharge 17,000 active duty service members. Jeri Ann, how disingenuous, how plain damn stupid is it for someone to sit before the House Armed Services Committee and tell them that we've determined that this is a mental health issue, and made it so simply by royal fiat, by executive order. How?
Oh yeah, it's the mindset that is most frightening in all this. All these topics that we've covered so far are just glimpses into the dysfunction, to say it nicely, of our government and our society. It's scary.
Yeah.
If it were not so, we wouldn't be taking this time to cover these things.
Yeah, it's just more. Well, I called it racist PR. Actually, it's transphobe PR. It's got nothing to do with military readiness and everything to do with animus against trans people, which makes him, Trump, a hit with that 34%. Okay, this next clip is even more disturbing. This is Secretary of State Marco Rubio justifying the renditioning of immigrants to Trump's outsourced offshore concentration camps.
The president was elected to keep America safe and to get rid of a bunch of perverts and pedophiles and child rapists out of our country. Here's something else we've done. We stopped giving student visas to people who are coming here to burn down our universities and take over libraries and harass people. Why are we giving student visas to people who are coming here to create disruption? And we've taken away the student visas of people that are come here to do that. It's simple. If you're coming to America to start riots, we're going to take away your student visa.
Jeri Ann, I'm not sure that disturbing is the right word. This guy is calling out our next door neighbors, yours and mine, calling them perverts and pedophiles and child rapists. He clearly wants people to believe that the over 21 million Hispanic and Latino immigrants living and working in the U.S. are dangerous criminals, and that anyone who dares speak against his boss's policies does not qualify for constitutional protections. Maybe disturbingly ignorant might be a better term.
I'm not so sure that evil is not a fitting term. Houston is the most diverse city in the United States, and the largest population of others other than white people would be Hispanics of course, all flavors of Hispanics. But if these people were dangerous, oh my gosh, can you imagine what Houston would look like? Can you imagine what my cul-de-sac would look like? Out of 8 houses, 3 of them, and the ones on each side of me, are from Mexico.
You're lucky to be alive.
And I know, and no habla inglés. And I guarantee you, Jose, that's his real name, by the way, who takes care of my yard for me and doesn't charge me, is a man that I would trust with my life. I would trust that man with my life. I've never seen such honest, hardworking people in all my life. Of course, that would certainly disqualify them from public service, especially in our Congress.
So, yeah, obviously, they're a big part of why they're doing this is that wink to their racist, transphobe, homophobe base. But God, there's got to be a bigger reason for all this bombast and pearl clutching. And lo and behold, there is.
Yep.
The Republicans' big, beautiful bill. That piece of legislation that will, among its many other crimes, steal $4 trillion from future generations of American taxpayers and give it to the ultra-wealthy, the 1%. Now, to be fair, there are some attractive features for working Americans in that big, beautiful bill. The proposed tax cuts, for example, would provide a tax cut of $1,000 for households making $50,000 a year or less, but households making $1 million or more per year would see a tax cut of $70,000 or more per year. To pay for these gifts, this billionaire welfare program would make sharp cuts to social programs and infrastructure maintenance while increasing interest rates and other taxes like import tariffs. You did some math on this, didn't you?
I did. Economists say that just the tariffs that they project will go into effect. Now, understand that so far Trump's tariff plan has been a dismal failure. There are not 70 countries on hold on the telephone right now waiting to make a deal like his press secretary has said in the past. I think he's made only one tentative deal, and there will be no deals. Other countries just going to ignore the United States. But if the tariff plan works, then economists say that the cost of living for average household will go up, I think it's $2,400 a year. So that $1,000 tax cut won't even keep up with that. Now, here's another deal.
Okay, I'm not a math major, but I'm gonna try it here. Let's see, $1,000 tax benefit, $2,400 increase in cost of living. That to me that looks like a net $1,400 kick in the groin.
Yep, it's going to cost me $100 and change every month just to live. Now the kicker is these tax cuts are going to rely on the tariff plan working, and there's not even a glimmer of hope for that. Nope. Or the country will go farther into debt than what is projected. So anyway, it's a mess.
Yeah. Well, it's
a mess.
Yeah, they've got other ways to pay for it. Like they're also going to make deep cuts to social programs like SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and Medicaid. We are literally talking about taking food and medicine away from our most needy citizens, seniors, and children. Jeri Ann, I think we are at a critical inflection point. You know that I'm a bit of an armchair constitutional scholar, a Bill of Rights nerd, so to speak. So before we talk about solutions, things our listeners can do, here's fellow nerd Floyd Abrams talking about the First Amendment.
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Or abridging the freedom of the speech or of the press. Or the right of the people peacefully to assemble. Or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
We here at Trans Truth believe that it is of critical importance to remember those words that our founding fathers thought important enough to make a part of the Constitution's Bill of Rights, that document that defines our system of law and government.
Okay, so we have covered immigration, concerns about immigration policies and actions. Let's see, rule of law, LGBT rights, women's rights, child labor, just preponderance of lies about anything and everything, and the overall distractions away from the big, beautiful bill that will make the rich richer and the non-rich less rich. So the unrich, let's coin a word here, the unrich.
Is that a math term?
I am a member of the unrich. So anyway, with all that in mind, let me make some suggestions about what they can do. Folks, first of all, stay informed. Find reliable news sources. Keep in mind the specific things that we have told you about today, and understand we've only skimmed the surface.
Yeah, let me stop you right there. That's not that, pay attention to what's going on. That's not a recommendation, bitches. That's an order.
Yeah, okay. Yes, ma'am. So, keep in mind the specific things that we've talked about, understanding that we've just skimmed the surface. We're going to revisit all or most of these issues in greater detail in future episodes, and be reminded that we're not going to abandon trans issues. Every episode will have some focus on trans issues also, but what we're more concerned with now is human rights. And remember, without human rights, there are no trans rights. The second thing we recommend is, hey, show up. If there's a demonstration or a protest, and I'm not talking about riots, let's keep it peaceful. We're talking about exercising your right to peacefully assemble. But it makes a difference. Just a few days ago, it is estimated that there were over 200 demonstrations with anywhere from, I think, 3 or 4 million to 12 million people just showing up to voice their concerns about what's going on.
Yeah, we're talking about the No King's Day protests, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
And that makes a difference. Look, he was so scared, so spooked by that turnout last week. He went and tried to start a war with Iran to distract us from that.
Yeah, that's sick there. And that's a dismal failure. It came back and said what a success that was. And now both those countries are, with bowed heads, going to go to the peace table and come up with a deal. And he no sooner turned around and they're firing missiles at each other again. He just doesn't understand the mindset of that part of the country. So anyway, next thing we recommend is to start focusing now on next year's midterm elections. We have got to get some intelligent people in office, enough to make a difference, and with dedicated people willing to seek the power that is necessary to start turning things around. It's been said that all politics is local, so do what you can. Find out which candidates are strong on democracy and human rights and support them however you can. Sign up to canvass from door to door, work the phones, stuff mailers, donate some money if you can. And finally, there's one other thing. Follow the money. Follow the money. And a ridiculous amount of money is spent on elections every year, and you need to know that a lot of corporations are behind the right-wing nuts and candidates and their agenda. And we will, in future episodes, start listing some of those for you. But Home Depot has turned turned away from DEI policies. Target seems to be doing the same thing. And of course, for a long time, Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby have funded hate groups. But we will fill you in on all this and equip you very well with knowledge to at least curtail some of the money going in the wrong direction. And finally, especially if you are an African-American listener, you need to spread this message whenever and wherever you can.
Today is Juneteenth. And that means we're celebrating the day 160 years ago when enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, finally learned they had been freed. Lots of other people knew, but they didn't know in Galveston. And here we are, 160 years later. And we're having some strong discussions. And let me tell you, the NAACP made the historic move not to invite a sitting president to their national convention, and this is why. NAACP President Derek Johnson says they're not sending an invitation to the White House for the first time since 1909.
That's right. The president who claims to have done more for the African-American community than any other president since Abraham Lincoln is this year the first president in history to not be invited to the NAACP's National Convention because of his policies that assail our democracy and the human rights of every person living in this country. Remember, without human rights, there can be no trans rights.
You have been listening to Trans Truth, the podcast that speaks the truth about what it means to be transgender. We hope that you have found this episode to be informative and enlightening, whether you are transgender yourself, if you have a friend or loved one who is transgender, and especially if you are simply looking to understand more about the transgender experience. Copyright 2025, Trans Truth.